At 6:01 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland is absent. Tom Baylor?
Here.
Ken Jones? Absent. Jeff Guard? Is absent. Melina Meyer?
Here.
Ann Schaefer is absent. David Allison?
Here.
David Gleason?
Here.
That is a quorum.
Okay, so first up on the topic is the 2018 city financial audit. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to our auditor.
Okay, well, my name is Steve Stankeen. I'm a director with BDO. And I think for your 2017 audit, Becky Shrez, a partner in our office, he was down here to present financial statements. He would have liked to come here, but he's up in Barrow right now. So, or Ukiagvik, I guess is the name. So you should have two documents, the financial statements, and then the audit wrap-up. And first one I'll go through is the audit wrap-up. So beginning on the first page there, there's we talk about the professional standards. They require us to communicate certain information to you related to the audit that are, in our professional judgment, are significant and relevant to your responsibilities as council members. So on page 3, we talk about the objective of our audit is to obtain reasonable, not absolute assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement, whether due to error or fraud. So we can't afford to look at everything. You can't afford to pay us to look at everything, so we have to sample and do that sort of thing. So that's why we make that statement. We issued an unmodified opinion on your financial statements. That's what some people would call a clean opinion. You can't get a better opinion than that. And it also means that your financial statements are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We also perform federal and state single audits, and we issued an unmodified opinion on the compliance requirements for both of those. Management's cooperation with us was excellent. And just wanted to point out that, having Dean Baugh here this year and also another accounting firm help out with audit preparation helped out a lot for the audit. And it's completed a lot earlier than last year. On to page 4 is the results of our audit. And I just wanted to point out there in the 4th paragraph down that this year the city adopted GASB 75. And what that means is the city for the first time has to record the other post-employment benefits that it will have to pay over a number of years. If you remember, a few years ago there was GASB 68 where you recorded the net pension liability in your financial statement. So now you have another liability on your financial statements for the other post-employment benefits through PERS. And on page 4, there's some, everything in your financial statements isn't, hard numbers, so to speak. I mean, most of them are, but there are some that are estimates. And, management does their best to estimate what, for example, the collectability of accounts receivable are, and we audit that to see if their judgment is reasonable. Landfill closure and post-closure care costs, it's another estimate in your financial statements that, the city does its best to estimate what it's going to cost the landfill, what it's going to cost to close that landfill, and we audit that. And then, of course, the net pension and OPEB liabilities are another estimate in your financial statements. And then there's also, because you're self-insured, there's an estimate there for what you owe for your self-insurance liability. On page 5, the results of continuing on with the results of our audit, we talk about corrected and uncorrected misstatements. So we did have to make some audit entries, and they were related to the items listed here, to capital assets, to interest expense and payable, to just some of the revenues and receivables, and to adjust allowance for doubtful accounts. And we also made a couple reclassification entries, but it doesn't have any impact on net position. And I guess in a perfect world, there'd be no adjustments, right? But I'd say most of the time we do run across we find some errors, and we propose adjustments to correct them, and management agrees that they need to be fixed, and they fix them, they post them. The other piece of this is we say that we received 12 journal entries from management after we received the trial balance. So, ideally, when we come down here to do the audit, management gives us a trial balance and there's no more adjustments. They're all done correcting everything. Well, they weren't quite finished with everything. They did the best they could for, with Dean not being here throughout the year. There's a lot of research he had to do to find out what was going on. So, so management, while we were down here, was giving us journal entries to post to the trial balance to fix things. There was also some uncorrected misstatements, and those are in the back here attached to the management representation letter. And those are really small amounts. We have to keep track of them, but they're so small that, and sometimes it depends on the timing where we're at in the audit, but management agreed to not post them, and we agreed that they didn't need to be posted because they're really immaterial to the financial statements. On page 6, just wanted to point out here the group audit, just so you realize that, as you may know, your city's financial statements also include the Cordova Community Center, or the medical center, the school district, and the volunteer fire department. We don't audit any of those. The fire department isn't audited at all, but in relation to the city's financial statements, the fire department numbers are really immaterial. So it's okay, we just put them in there the way they give them to us, and we don't do any work on those. It's different with the medical center and the school district. Those are significant to the city of Cordova, but they are audited by other auditors. So we just take what those auditors give us and we put those into your financial statements. We ourselves don't do any work over those two entities. On page 7, we talk about internal controls, and we had just one significant deficiency, and there was no review of journal entries. And if you remember from 2017, that was also reported as a deficiency. And it's mostly due to staff shortage, just not having full staff here and having somebody that can review them, that understands them. Our understanding is that the policy has been changed effective January 1 of 2019, and journal entries are now being reviewed. Then on the attachment on just after page 15, just wanted to show you, this is what we call the management representation letter. It's signed by management, and it just lists out all of the representations that management is representing to us. These are the things that they've said they've done. And then attached to the, after the management representation letter, there's not a page number, but there's a schedule of the audit adjustments, so you can see what those are and the dollar amounts of those. And then on the very last page is what we call the uncorrected misstatements. And they're really, really small in relation to the city's financial statement as a whole, and we're not posted to your general ledger. That was all the comments I had on the audit wrap-up document. Does anyone have any questions? Want me to go into anything further detail?
Council, anybody that has any questions?
Okay. Then we get to the financial statements. And if you go to page 6, is the statement of net position, or, you know, for other for-profit entities, it would be called a balance sheet. So you have your, on page 6 is the assets of the city. So you have your you know, it shows the assets of your governmental activities, so that's all your governmental funds. And then you have another column for your business type activities. Those are all your enterprise funds. And then, of course, the component units, you can see the assets there. And you can see the total for the city is $106 million in total assets and deferred outflows of resources. They had about 115 million in 2017. And there's just a couple new things in the assets here that weren't there last year. One is there's a lease receivable amount of $751,000. That's new this year. That's related to the lease of the old museum and library. So that's the present value of the future payments that they're going to be making on the lease. And then down in the deferred outflows of resources section, there's an asset there it's not that big, related to post-employment benefits. Then over on page 7 is the liabilities and the net position of the city. And there's a post-employment benefits liability, $1.3 million. That's new this year. And there's also a deferred inflow also related to the post-employment benefits of $476,000. Those were not there last year.
I got a question there.
Sure.
So the lease receivable, you said 751,000, that's for what? The old library museum?
That's for the payments that the developer will be making over X number of years, unless they exercise their option to purchase that property.
Okay. Does that, I guess, that money's going back into the permanent fund, or how do you know where that?
Oh, I believe it's going into the general fund.
Okay. Because I believe that was supposed to go in the permanent fund when we sold that, so that's why I had a question on that.
Okay. I don't know if there's no.
Yeah.
I think council maybe would have to do that after we got the money. Can we make automatic payments?
Well, when we sold it, and that was the agreement when discussion was when we sold that, that money,
Let me see.
I don't want to get off track, but we took money out to pay down make a payment on the Civic Center. And when we did that, we said, all right, well, if we do that, then when that gets sold over there, that money needs to go back to replenish the money we pulled out. So that was supposed to go back into the permanent fund and repay that money.
You know, I'm seeing here that the lease receivable is recorded in the general fund. So I would assume when the payments come in, they're going into the general fund, but that's not to say they couldn't get.
All right, well, we'll have
transfer.
to take that up then, I guess.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
thank you.
And on page 8 and 9, it's getting kind of awkward because the state of Alaska now, for when these reports get submitted, they want a bigger font size. So now some of these schedules that used to fit on one page, we have to put them on 2 pages so that the print doesn't get too small. Anyway, this is like, you know, similar to an income statement, I guess you'd call it, but it shows all the, you know, it breaks out the, you can see all the revenues and expenses for all of the funds of the city. You have the primary government, that's all your kind of your, mostly your general fund type activities at the top, and then further down to business type, you got your port, water, sewer. So it shows those. It also shows the component units. You'll see further on back, it's a little bit easier to look at, and there's a little bit more detail further on back. On page 10 is the balance sheet for the for your governmental fund, so it includes your general fund. And you can see you have unassigned fund balance of about $1.4 million. On page 12 is the statement of revenues and expenditures and changes in fund balances for the governmental funds. It shows that your general fund, after revenues and expenses and your transfers out, your fund balance decreased by $722,000. And your general reserve special revenue fund, that fund balance decreased by about $129,000. And then all your non-major funds, their fund balance increased by about $1.4 million. It was at a deficit of $716,000, and now they're up to about $650,000. Over on pages 14 and 15, it's a landscape instead of portrait. This is one that used to be one page portrait, now it's 2 pages landscape, but balance sheet for, or statement of net position, or balance sheet for all your enterprise funds. So you can see the assets and liabilities of the port, water, sewer, and refuse, and Odiak Park.
I had one question about the doubtful accounts for
Yes.
the port.
Yeah.
How long are those bills, have they not been paid, or like how do you guys calculate that amount?
Well, the city calculates it,
Okay,
but I know, so they had a list of accounts receivable, and we went through that with the city staff, and there was some significant balances, and where, they're not paying. I think the city's even gotten the boat, and it's not worth anything. And so, most of what's in the doubtful accounts, it appears as though the city's not going to recover much of that. But I don't recall exactly how long some of those have been on the books.
I don't know for sure, but I would say that at least one that's 20 years.
I guess that's what I was curious, if they're last 5 years or they're really old,
this
so.
Real old, and then it's 5-10 years.
Thanks.
Yeah, and it's something the city might want to consider doing in the future, is to actually
Welcome to Copper Valley Cell Phone Conference.
write those things off.
Please enter your conference. The administrator has not yet arrived.
That's right.
The conference administrator has joined the conference. There are 2 attendees on the conference call.
Sorry, Jeff.
No problem.
Over on to page 16 is the statement of revenues and expenses and changes in net position for all of the enterprise funds. So you can see that the port, after all revenues and expenses, they had a loss. It says change in net positions. It's similar to a loss, actually, $705,000. So that's why their net position went down. The water and sewer both had losses of $636,000 and $410,000 respectively. And then the refuse, had a profit of $161,000, and the park had, $6,000 in profit roughly.
Steve,
Yes.
just to clarify, those losses in those funds are operating losses? And that's because of the depreciation expense, which is not
Yes.
funded?
Yes.
But it's not a day-to-day a cash loss.
Right. Yeah, these are full accrual, so it's not cash basis. So, yeah, that's a good point. If you go look up at close to the top of that page, the income loss from operations, you can see those port water sewer, you know, they're losing money from operations, but then you look at depreciation just a little bit up above, and, you know, they're pretty close to depreciation. So, you know, I think your rates are covering your operating expenses, or just except for depreciation.
So if you look, for example, where it says depreciation for the harbor at 762, and you look down at the net change in position at 705, it actually operated at $57,000 in the black. So,
Yeah. And
But the port was the only one in 2019 that did. Right, because it didn't make up that depreciation. If you take out the depreciation, I think.
yeah, sewer was a break even, and water was down 16, something like that.
But we also raised the rates recently on the port, so that probably isn't going to be.
We did 5% this year, so this is, you got to remember, this is back to 2018, so.
yeah. And also, I would bet that a lot of the depreciation is related to assets that were grant funded, so it's not dollars that you put out for, you know, purchasing those assets. It was funded through grants, so that's just something else to think about. Starting on page 19 are the notes to the financial statements, and you know, this is where you can go to find a little bit more information about some of the numbers that are in the financial statements pieces that we just went over. So it'll have a little bit more information on how your cash and investments are split between, you know, bank deposits and investments, what types of securities you're invested in. Shows a detail of your capital assets. I wasn't going to go through the notes unless somebody had a specific question about what was in those. And starting on page 71 is the general fund budget and actual scheduled revenues and expenditures. So you can see in quite a bit of detail how you did in relation to budget. You know, for your revenues on page 71, and see where you.
Sorry. Can I ask a quick question?
Yes,
Going back to page 21.
sure.
So the definition of the major government funds there. So the
Yes.
General Reserve Special Reserve Fund accounts for the financial activities related to land purchases and sales and serves as the city's emergency reserve fund. So if that goes to land purchases and sales, then that money should go into the General Reserve Special Fund, correct? We're going back to the library museum instead of the general fund.
Yeah, I mean, it appears by looking, I mean, yeah, by reading this, I would agree with you. I don't know exactly what the ordinance says, but my guess is you're absolutely right.
Okay, we'll take that up as a council, but all right. I wanna
Yeah,
clarify
yeah.
that. Thank you.
Yeah, I was under the impression that all land sales went into the permanent fund. However, with this lease with option to buy thing, lease payments have always gone into the general fund,
Yeah,
but purchases go to the permanent fund. But yeah, we can
yeah, we'll take it up.
clean that up however it needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. So then starting on, towards the bottom, page 72, then you can see how each department within the city performed in relation to the budget there. It really looks like, you know, it looks like they did a pretty good job of coming in real close to budget in most of the departments. And then further on back, there's, you know, we saw the enterprise fund statements up front, but in the back here, they're repeated, but there's more detail for each one of those funds if you want to see that. And then on page 105 is schedule of expenditures of federal awards. That's That's all the revenue that you recognized for federal award programs in 2018. And compared to, you're about 50% below, or about 100% below last year. You had about 2.2 million in federal awards in 2017. This year, you're at $1.1 million for federal awards. And on page 106 is the schedule of state financial assistance. And it shows that you received about $2.8 million of state financial assistance, and that's down from 2017 was at about $3.4 million. And beginning on page 109 is the single audit reports. If you go to, starting on page 116, these are the summary of our auditor results of auditing your federal and state programs. And you know, we don't have any federal award findings. We don't have any state award findings. And there is the one right at the top of 116 there under financial statements, the significant deficiency identified. We said yes, and that's the finding related to the journal entry review, and that's shown on page 117, finding 2018-1. And starting on page 119 is something that the city puts together. We say it's unaudited. These are the city's responses to the findings. And one thing that they're required to do is comment on last year's findings and the status of those. So that's on pages 120 and 121. And good news is, you know, you can see almost all of those findings that were there in 2017 have been resolved in 2018. And the one that's left is that one over again, the journal entries, and that's going to be starting in 2000, well, it's already in process now where they're actually reviewing journal entries. And on page 120, the last page there, 122 is management's corrective action plan. And that's their action they're going to do for clearing this finding, is that the journal entries will be made by the finance director and assistant, and they'll each sign or initial the journal entries, so indicating that one prepared it, one approved it.
Thank you, Dean, for this stuff.
Yeah.
Fix this up.
I worked with Dean years ago when he was at the city of Wasilla when Sarah Palin was the mayor.
Yahoo. She owes me that $200 back that I gave her to run. You don't complete your term, you should pay your money back.
No longer Alaska's biggest embarrassment.
Yeah. But I'd be happy to, answer any other questions you may have. It's a lot of information, I know. There's just some things in there that are like your cash flow statements. I didn't even go over those because those are just really difficult to follow for anybody. But basically, the cash flow statements are, it's basically like cash basis type thing, showing where the money's coming in, where it's going out, and that's for the enterprise funds.
Well, I really appreciate having this audit earlier this year than last year when we saw it, and it was pretty far behind. And so it's nice to see this right before we go into our 2020 budget.
Yeah, we do too. I mean, it makes it easier for us as well to get things issued on time. And what CCMC had done too, it really helped out a lot getting their audit done on time. Because without that, we wouldn't have been able to. That's where we were last year. We can't issue without that included in the city's financial statement. So with their help, getting their audit done, and Dean and working with the other accounting firm and getting audit prep, it made things go a lot better. And hopefully you're happy that it got issued when it did. Not too late.
Any other questions from council before we move on to our next item?
Melina, do you mind if I ask one?
Go
Can you tell me where the self-funded health insurance is accounted for in here?
It's under, it's not, it's, well, if you go to page 10, health claims payable, $95,000. Right in the middle of, third line down from liabilities.
Because when we do year ends, you know, each department has a health insurance line, and I don't know where they're getting these numbers that they plug in to for the previous years.
That's probably the expense, right? Expense side?
Yeah, expensive.
Yeah. So this is the payable. So this 95,000 represents approximately 3 months worth of claims that were incurred prior to December 31st, 2018, and paid in 2019. Now, the expense side of that,
It's just lumped into employees' salary and
and
benefits.
benefits, yes. The financial statements aren't that detailed to show, salaries and benefits is where it's going to be. It just won't.
I think beginning in this year, in 2019, that difference will be specifically tracked and accounted for. There's a special fund being set up just to track that.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the audit? All right, thank you.
Thank you. And if anything, you think of something later on that comes up, maybe get in touch with Alan and he can get a hold of us and we can help you out if you have any further questions.
Appreciate that. Appreciate you coming down and doing the presentation in person.
I love coming to Cordova.
You hit the only 2 rainy days of the year.
I know. Well, I was down here for field work and it was gorgeous. And it was really nice.
All right, so the second item on the agenda is the 2020 budget timeline. I kind of added this one because I know that we're coming up on the 2020 budget, and I thought as council, we should decide what part of it we want to discuss. We want to discuss the revenues part first, get a draft when we expect it by, and kind of look at our schedule for next couple months. Does anyone have any initial reactions to the 2020 budget timeline? What you want to see, or?
It's the normal time that we do.
We have to have it passed by December 28th or something, and if we don't do it by then, the last draft of the budget becomes the approved budget. But I think that we're gonna have to take a close look at where our revenues are gonna be coming at through the state. We're losing some money. Alan might have some better numbers on that, but school bond reimbursement. We're just gonna have to prepare for the revenue, whether we're gonna have to raise taxes or do some cuts, but we're gonna have to have a discussion about what council wants to do. So Alan, do you have any thing to add
Well,
or any ideas?
this year we spent time doing a new budget document for preparation of the budget. It won't change this. This will still be the same if you choose to go forward with that, and Leif will put that together. But what we did this year, trying to get a handle on things, we prepared a new spreadsheet that has 2009 through 2018 in here. And so it's a 9-year comparison. It gives us an average. And then we have the adopted 19, the proposed 20, and like I did a couple years ago or last year, we have the difference in that particular line item that'll be color coded. It tells you whether it's over or under the previous year. And so then we'll have an average of that. So we have this is a fairly complicated document. And the problem is because we've added line items that are no longer in use. For example, you might have a line item from 2009 that's no longer being used. That's still in this document. So it's a little more complicated than cutting and pasting from an Excel file that I get back. I'm going to have to hand enter all of these documents. Now, we've already asked council or asked departments to give us their projections for operating funds. I've asked Cindy, about 9 weeks ago, I asked her for the personnel numbers, and we've had some complications in that. So hopefully those will get to me, and then we can start plugging those in. So, I mean, I can build a very basic budget for you to review like we did up on the board last year pretty soon. My plan was to have that first presentation to you during the work session in October, first meeting in October. Because actually I was going to do it in September, but we've had these couple of work sessions where we've had other things going on. So that was my plan, if that's what you'd like me to do.
How much, do you know about how much we're not going to be getting from the state that we did in this year in 2019?
Well, we get fed numbers kind of, we sort of guesstimate certain numbers, and then those numbers get fed to us at some point during the end of the year. There's a PILT number that's federal. We know that the debt service reimbursement is going to be half. So that number is 463 instead of 952. I mean, that's the projection we have because that's what we got last year. So we're counting on half of that. And we never know that number until they give us the final number when they pass a budget. So some of those are a little bit harder for us to determine. We don't know individual numbers. We got a number back for community assistance program. That number's 108,000. We got an email from that. And we get those kinds of things. So we guesstimate until we get verification. But I think you're going to be somewhere between 750 and $1 million down. In other words, last year's budget was 11,063,000. I think it's going to be more like, geez, a projection we made way back in 2017 is going to be more like 10 million, 10.2 million.
I think there was some money set aside by past council specifically for this. I don't know how much, but that's what I've been told. We could find out how much that was. Am I right?
Well, I think that's our.
You're correct. There's resolutions that say that, but it takes 7 votes. So you get 2 council members or 1 council member and a mayor that don't agree with that, which is what happened the last time we tried to use permanent fund money for part of the bond debt reimbursement. It did not get by council.
In 2017, council appropriated $875,000 from the permanent fund to shore up the budget. The last 2 years, we haven't done that. So the money that's put aside for this, there's either the permanent fund or there's that central treasury fund. Permanent fund had 8.4 million in it. It now has 7.3 million in it because we paid the hospital PERS, or we're paying it. The process hasn't been completed yet. It could actually be down to 7.1 million because you appropriated up to 1.3 million. And then there's the central treasury fund of $1 million and change, just short of $1.1 million. So those are the funds that are available to you to shore up the budget in any given year.
So,
So there's no other funds besides those. The other thing we have is we call it the central treasury. And that's really our swimming pool of money that is the cash flow that feeds the monster as it goes month to month, day to day, and paying bills and receiving. And beginning of the year, we are always down to fumes in the beginning of the year. We don't get our big payments until later in the year. For example, the fish tax number we'll get sometime in October.
Gotcha, thank you.
so I guess, we're gonna have to look at all this, but in 2017, you said they took out 800,000, somewhere around that?
875.
875. But from 2017, 2019, there's been some changes. Hopefully, we can look at our expenses. I think through attrition, I think we've dropped some personnel, I believe. I guess I would like to see what our costs are. That might be the difference. I think the attitude might have been back then is like, well, let's make our cuts before we dig into it. So that'll be a tough subject for conversation, when we get going on this. And the fish tax, help me out there, is that a year behind, lag behind? Okay. So last year really wasn't all that great of a season, or was it?
It's like 130 grand according to this for shared fisheries tax.
That's.
No,
I
that's
believe
the
it's
shared.
more. It's
The raw fish tax
Oh.
is the big number.
In your budget on page 38, it
One
That was
point-
the
details the
budget.
10-year history of the raw fish tax.
So we had 630, almost 630 over what we budgeted for.
But we don't know what is that 2018?
The budget we're working on will be this summer's fish.
That's what I'm getting at. Okay. And we've had, I guess the other point is we've had a good year.
A lot of pounds.
Yeah, so that might be helpful. I guess I'm just trying to be positive here.
Yeah, the bad year, we got 1.4 million or
I
something.
know.
Nobody expected
so
that at all.
horrible.
Right, right. And I was told that since it was such a delayed deal, that they sent a lot of the offshore processors home, so they actually processed more in town, so that could help, so,
And we get raw fish tax on hatchery fish too, if they're processed at a
yeah.
local processor, it's based on.
So all of those things will work into our decision, as far as where we're gonna get the money from, so.
We also might need to adjust the sales tax, because in 2018, we were, I guess, off by almost $400,000.
Yeah.
So getting that extra raw fish tax helped make up for that. And then the motor fuel tax that we had budgeted in there that got repealed, that was $160,000 that was in our budget that we didn't have. So
Okay.
that raw fish tax that we got from the state actually just kind of made up for those two line items.
Yeah, and I guess going back to my early statement, I think in 2017, 2018, maybe they're gonna cry for, let's make some cuts before we take, and you can only cut so much, and, we'll have that discussion, maybe we're there, so, yeah. Hopefully we can make that up without raising taxes.
So in the past, maybe Susan can help me with this. They've done a work session on revenue discussion. That's kind of what we were
I mean,
back
it's
and forth.
different every year. Sometimes we like to wait till after the end of October because then you have third quarter sales tax in and maybe more of those state payments are in. But I don't know if that helps you guess better what they'll be for the following year. And then November's been a month that we've been able to do stuff lately because nobody's been going to AML, but I have at least 2 going to AML this year, and Tom might be interested. So that's a week that you take out of November, and then Thanksgiving week is usually a tough week to do much. So I guess I would say at least have 1 or 2 work sessions in October. Of course, you have, the biggest variable is that we'll have a new manager. We don't know when they're starting. So how much is Ellen supposed to do? How much is the new supposed to do? I mean, that's kind of, I think, what Alan wanted as an answer from you guys today.
That's kind of why I put it on here too, is just for council to decide what our timeline, what we're expecting out of our city manager currently.
Madam Mayor?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, we're gonna have, we'll just call it an odd enough budget process this year with, changes in money from the state that I don't think we should leave it all to the end and drop it on our new manager's, plate. If there are adjustments we decide we need to do later on down the road during the process, that's fine, but I think we at least need to get started on corralling the numbers so we can all take a look at them, so we have an idea, some kind of idea of what we're gonna be looking at for revenues this year. We can compare that with historical, expenses and see where we wanna go from there, whether it's cuts or raising revenues or what, but there's gonna be some stuff needs to be done, and I don't think we want to hold off on this.
Looking for. So we're talking about,
All right, so I guess I hear from one person that we want to get going on this budget process as soon as possible. Anybody else?
I'm gonna defer to Mr. Allison. He's done more of these budgets than I.
Well, I think what Manager Allen said, you know, get a presentation on what he's got there and gives us a starting point, and we'll start changing numbers.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we ought to start with anyway. Sounds like that work is well on the way to being done already, so we'll get that going and see where that takes us.
You know, you can look in your current budget document and you can get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year snapshot of where the revenues are. And 3 of those years are actual numbers. So you can understand pretty clearly what's going on, for example, with property tax, sales and use taxes. You know, in 2018, we were pretty optimistic, thinking things were headed in this direction, but then it was a lousy fish year, you know, so we didn't quite get that. So this year, we adjusted our revenues downward by, you know, a couple $100,000 down to 3.3 million. We'll see where we are with that. We may be close, maybe not. Good fall, you never know. And then make an estimate of where we need to adjust again downwards. The ones that we're not sure of are the same ones we weren't sure of last year. That's the $580,000 for the timber receipts. Last year, we put that in there because they had said that they were going to repass that, so we've got to figure that number out. If that's going to be, we had originally said that we were going to move that out of the budget, and that was going to sort of be extra for us, but we had to fill in last year because we had lower revenues projected. The big one is going to be the debt relief. We're pretty certain what that number is, $460,000 down. So that's our first starting point. And then the other considerations, and we've talked about this earlier, is that, you know, $250,000 to the school district. I have it programmed in right now, 1.85 million, or 875,000, 1.75 million. You know, the CCMC has asked for additional funding so that they can pay their PERS obligation, $900 to $1 million. So if you take that 3 or 4 in that 250 plus the 4, you're pretty close to $1 million. And then we increased the fish tax number to $1,050,000, which is close to the 10-year historical average. So that brings it down. That's why I'm pretty close around 750 being down for next year. But then I'll get that all plugged in there. And then, you know, there's 2% union contract increase, which has been negotiated through the end of 2021. It's going to be 2, 2, and 2 on that. So those things always increase. One of the things that's been beneficial to us is we've not had a premium increase for a health insurance in 5 years. And if we don't get one in October, it'll be 6 years in a row. That's very helpful.
I would say on the raw fish tax, definitely ain't gonna get any worse. It's gotta be bigger than that number that we had a lot of pounds this year.
Well, and that's, yeah, what we were trying to do is take the uncertainty out of that budgeting process by, first of all, budgeting an established amount every year. If we're over that number, then as you can see in this year's audited statements, it backfilled some of the places that we were short. And then if you're short, then it comes out of cash flow. And, so that you don't have those ebbs and flows, you can count on a consistent budget number, because to go forward and say, next year we're going to get 1.8 million, we just don't know what's happening. If it only comes at 9, you're $900,000 off. So it's trying to be safer than sorry on those.
I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think it would be less than this. I'm not saying make it more, but I doubt it would be less than this. We definitely caught more fish this year.
Well,
I
that's,
don't know, how many pinks you guys get, 50 million?
No, it was like 47 million total.
Pretty close, yeah.
What was the price? So it's based on
I
value.
know,
It's
it's
not based
value,
on.
not just pounds.
35 cents a pound?
30 cents.
30.
I mean, it was,
But Trident didn't get the cost recovery for VFTA, which they have the last few years. So that was a big hit.
That went to Valdez, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So-
big.
so my plan is in the first meeting in October, I'll have a draft budget for you. And we will have it on the board. We have the ability to turn the colors on so you can see where we're over and under. And we'll estimate all of those things as best we can.
is that secure rural schools? Is that like, that's a guaranteed, you're gonna get something every year, or is it still up in the air?
It has to be reappropriated. I think it was reappropriated for 18 and 19, but I'm not sure it's been reappropriated for 20. I'll find out from Senator Murkowski's staff, but, and they've been cutting that number every year. We used to get 800 and some, now it's down to 580. And 580 was 95% of what we got the year before that.
We originally got 1.5 or 1.6.
Yeah, and so they're reducing that number by 5% every year.
And then what dates is Dean going to be, is he going to be able to help with preparing the budget at all?
Yeah, some, but Dean has a lot to do in terms of general ledger adjustments and entries and those kinds of things. He's only going to be here for 3 weeks. So, but he will have time, and there's a bunch of accounts that we have that we didn't have in the past that Dean has threw out there for us to work with. And so he's going to have to help me with some of those in the estimates, but he'll help me as much as he can. So the plan right now would be to have the meeting on the 3rd and the meeting on the 16th?
Second and the 16th.
2nd and the 16th, 2 budget presentations. And I think after those 2 in discussion, if we start early or if we have a longer work session on either of those, you can get pretty far along. We did the budget in 17 in 4 meetings, I think. So.
What are Dean's dates again?
The 3rd through the 24th.
Okay.
But, and Dean is, as you know, he's not on the same contract we had before. We have a separate letter of offer from him that we signed for him to come back. And him being here and getting here and staying here is very expensive. So we've got to have him do what he's supposed to do when he's here. So he's got his whole thing figured out, so.
Okay. So do you think that we should have longer work sessions maybe coming up, or Ms. Council?
Well, I think we do on the 2nd, and then determine if you want to have another one the next week, and then you could have a 3rd one the week after that. So you could get 3 work sessions in on this. It'd be nice to have a couple hours, I think, to go through everything, because there's a lot of material to go through. And then you have to have time to talk about those individual line items and things and figure out where you want to be on those.
So we can talk about it at the regular pending agenda.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Any other comments about the 2020 budget before we?
I'd like to add one more thing, if I may.
Okay.
If you go and read your budget and look through it carefully, I think it will help answer some of the questions you may have about different line items and those kinds of things, because our budget really does have a lot of information in it. And I think from a historical perspective and from a futuristic perspective, it's very helpful if you take a look at those big categories that you want to look at and see where we're at. How much we've given to the, the school district average over the last 10 years. All of those things on those individual places are all in there that give you that information. And that's why it got so big.
Anyone else, council? Councilman Guard, do you have anything to add before we end the work session?
Nothing else. Thank you.
All right,
You looking for a motion?
yeah, to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we'll adjourn.